Hey there, Dango Stu here. Today's video is about finishing the back deck on Renko and is proudly sponsored by marineengine.com. So, huge thanks to marineengine.com for coming back on board and sponsoring this next series of videos. I've got a few jobs to wrap up. We're going to finish some work on Renko, and I've got that little top hat sailing boat I need to scrub up and sell. And then we're going to start the new boat project, which I'll tell you more about later. I know painting's not the most interesting job in the world to do or watch, so I won't film most of it. But I do need to tick it off the list and just get the back deck done, get the rust treated and sealed up again. We'll do a few other little odd jobs along the way though, so enjoy. All right, let's head down to the boat. Super high tides last night, like really high. People are saying highest they've seen in 16 years, one could be longer, but I'm going to do a little bit of homework to see what that's about. Check the air pressure, winds, all that kind of thing. We had some fresh water coming down the river too, so it looks like it was a bit of a perfect storm of all those things combining to make it, higher than it's been in most people's memory. So, case in point with the fresh water coming down the river, always washes a fair bit of debris down with it. Didn't want to hit that at night. This is the outboard off the tinny before the Savage Badger, so I've got it here so I could do some work on it. Thought it'd be a nice place to work, a nice place to film, but I want to paint the deck, so we might have to maybe shuffle everything over, paint one section and then move everything back. Since I saw you last, I've been engaged in an uncharacteristic fit of tidying up. As I was cleaning up, here's just a weight I used for a buoy, marker buoy. It's quite heavy, it's lead completely, so I might find somewhere low down to keep that, so it's a bit of ballast at the same time when it's not being used. Not that we need it, but it's not going to hurt. When I put that lead weight right at the transom, lowest point, furthest back, whatever, I actually found this tin of epoxy to harden around the epoxy, and I believe that is this epoxy, this grey. So that's nice, it means I can touch up some of that stuff. Now these rusty metal boxes are gone, that rust won't come back. That's not rust from the boat, that's rust that's just bled onto the deck. So the deck's a different colour, but we can do these stands. Few bits of rust, a few bits where I put some white on, touched up, so I'm glad we've got that. It is a nice afternoon though, and I'm not feeling massively workish, so that looks like a fun job. Let's do that. It's like seeing a squirrel with me. Work's over here, squirrel's over there. In this case, the squirrel is quite a few things here got broken. I had to pull up starboard side 2, taking a group of people up to Arne's funeral, sadly. And a few things got caught up on a tall wharf. So one of the things that broke was my dipstick, but this end is the end that goes in the tank. So I have a thinner dowel that I'm simply going to notch with the old markings. When I made this dipstick, it actually came down the side of the hull and came to a hard stop. It bent slightly, and that's how I calibrated these notches. So having one slightly thinner and slightly more flexible is actually a good thing. So let's mark it, notch it, and then we can bin this and keep the new one. For the non-boaties, a dipstick like this is purely in lieu of fuel gauge. So you just put it in the tank, see how full it is, you'll see the diesel on the stick. When we finish making it, I'll dip the tanks and we'll see what's in there. These two tanks are connected, so they should be relatively equal, but if they're not connected, they can be different. And don't worry, I'm not likely to instantly cut through it all into my lead. It's a reasonably tough bit of wood. Because of the shape of the tank, the markings aren't linear, so I think by here it is, because it becomes square. So you can see these two markings are similar distance. I think they're 100 litres each. but then the rest of the tank, yeah, it takes up a lot more of the stick. As you can hopefully see with the sun, it's just up to the bottom mark, so definitely need to put some more fuel in soon. Anyway, that's how that works. That put off doing any real work for a couple of minutes. Cleaned up the rack a bit. Oh, that's sad. That's Dad's fishing rod. He bought that up not too long ago. Didn't get to use it enough. This sort of rust I'm going to treat with the rust converter before we prime it and paint. So I'm going to chip off all these little blisters. Ugh. That's another nasty one. Okay, next job on the list is to go buy more rust converter because I'm out. Oh well, easy to get at least. Now we have a log stuck on the Savage Badger. Coming downstream. Let's lift the motor up, it should just be on its way, I think. Bye-bye, log. Now I've done the chipping and the wire wheel on the grinder, I'm going to put some rust converter on. The one I'm using is this one, just a White Knight rust guard. I got it from Bunnings. I've previously used the Galmet one, but this is just easier to find. The other one I have to order online. Essentially the active ingredient in this is tannic acid with some sort of binding agent in it, PVA or something I think I've been told, but don't quote me on that. Essentially what the tannic acid does is convert the rust into ferric tannate, which is more stable. We can then paint over the top of that and shouldn't have any problems. Alright, we'll brush it on now, let it sit for quite a while to sort of complete its reaction. Sometimes I find that you know, you'll see some rust areas still, and I'll put a little bit more on because obviously what I've put on has been exhausted, but I try not to put too much on to start with. You'll also notice no problems here where the old steel was. All the problems I'm having are where this new sheet was that I put in Bundaberg. It was sandblasted, so I don't really know why, but it is what it is. Anyway, where it's rusted, and this is kind of interesting, is that my understanding also previously, when people had new steel, they would actually intentionally let it rust to give it its profile, then convert it with an acid, then paint. It's kind of like a poor man sandblasting to a degree. So I'm hoping that by the time we treat this and paint it again, the problem won't come back, at least not in these spots. On top of the ferric tannate, once it's done its thing, we'll use a primer while the rust converter over here does its thing. Here's some rust converter I put on when we're on the hard stand still. This also had a little bit of primer on it. What I'm going to do now is put some bog in here just to smooth it off a bit before we put the new deck paint onto here. So I'll put the bog on, then we'll sand the whole top to key the old paint as well as smooth off the bog. This is where the drawers were sitting, so it was rubbing and taking the paint off, causing it to rust. Then it would rub the rust off and, you know, go into fresh metal, which would then rust, which is why this is deeper than the deck is. Just stirring now till the colour's uniform. In preparation for painting the deck, move this barrel over. Bit of muddy gunk under there, but my pressurised water's not working, so let's diagnose that so we can hose the mud off and then let it dry. As a part of this process, I'm going to map out the electrics better than I did the first time. I started it, but I didn't do a great job. So let's have a look now. There's our pump down there. I think we unplug this and we just see whether we've got power to here, and then we'll kind of know if it's a power supply issue or a pump issue, or maybe a bad connection downstream. Let's have a look. Okay, let's go switch it on. Light comes on there. Yeah, not getting any power to here, which is kind of good. I'd rather it be a power supply problem than a dead water pump. So let's keep tracing that backwards. I'm going to take this switch panel out so we can just see if we actually have power to the switch. The fact the light came on doesn't necessarily mean the power to the pump is working. It just means the power to the light's working, I think. Could be wrong there. The other thing I do have a habit of doing is every time I do this, run the risk of disturbing a wire. Yes, I think the wire's just come off the back of the switch. Alright, I'm just going to leave that in place like that until we're sure everything's working, but we have water pressure. That was nice and easy. Really, I should just have had more slack, better mechanical protection, all that kind of thing there, so lesson for me. Alright, let's get the hose out and clean this mud up. You can see the difference here between where the barrel was and not the colour difference. You can also see how the pressure is fluctuating a lot on this pump, which I believe could be an indication the accumulator needs some more air in it. So I'll show you what that's about. I've done about as much as I can prep-wise on the deck. I need it to dry now. The sun is out, so I think we'll get some primer onto this rust converter this afternoon. In the meantime, what I'm actually going to do is jump in the Savage Badger and go and get some glue off that little top hat boat that I've also got to fix up so I can sell. I want the glue just to fix this seat here. I'm going to glue and screw that on so it's stronger. Oh, and while I was waiting for the camera to charge, can't really see it because it's dirty, but I was just experimenting. You can sort of see how chalky it is here. This is just a light rub with some gumption and a bit of a pad. Somebody mentioned gumption in the comments, and I actually had a tub on Renko that I found, so I thought I'd give it a go, and yeah, early indications are it's going to do the job quite nicely. Alright, let's go get this glue. Not going to need a huge amount. I think just one pump of each should do it. I spoke this one, nice timber work inside. It's for sale. If you want a top hat with an electric motor conversion, it's going cheap. It was re-gel coated not long ago too. Stainless steel mast step. All the good stuff. Alright, let's get back to Renko. Let's put this glue down the back here, and then there's some screws in the front that will hold it. Alright, I reckon that'll do it. Couple of screws. Alright, here still needs to dry a bit more, but I'm going to sand this bog, rough this up, and then we'll put some of the deck paint on here, see how it goes. Bit of a gouge in it, but you know, it's an old steel boat. That'll do it as far as I'm concerned. This is the deck paint I'm going to use, a bit of Norglass, slip resistant, cream this time. I'm actually going to try, because this is a really gloss finish that's on here, I have sanded it, but I'm actually going to try adding a little bit of this Penetrol. I'm going to give that a go, just particularly because I'm a little bit worried about this being a bit too smooth still. I'm going a lot of single pack paints this time. You know, epoxy paints, 2-part paints are good, but I'm going to see how I go just making it easier to touch up rather than needing to mix up paint, to be able to just open this tin, do a touch up more frequently, and seeing whether that actually turns out to be a better way to go with a steel boat. Because the truth is I never did any touch ups on the 2-pack paint that was on originally, whereas now I can kind of go around the outside, touch up the blue, touch up the deck relatively easily. Each of these little marks here is 10% for thinners. So with the Penetrol, we only need half of one of those. I haven't done the priming here for the latch yet, but I'm going to put some paint on here, A, because I have it, you know, I've mixed up too much, and B, this is the deck paint that's actually on the deck, so it's a good test of how it goes on over the top of the deck paint, which I'll be doing the entire deck with. So let's push on. Comes the old Dangar ferry. You can catch that ferry from Brooklyn to the island if ever you want to visit. It was starting to get late by the time that was done, so time to head home and let those coats dry. Good morning. Missed today because of the rain, but the sun is out again. So I'm just going to pressure wash the deck and then we'll push on. I'm going to do a couple more coats here and here, so I can put the barrel back. And then we're going to do the priming over the rust converter. Okay, this day is going quickly. Getting to the afternoon. I've been washing, took quite a while to dry, but did a bit more chipping, a bit more rust converting. Interesting around these welds, a lot of the paint had sort of delaminated, which I think, I don't know, it's interesting. It was sandblasted, then welded. Did the heat affect it? Not sure. Anyway, that's now dried, so I am going to put some epoxy primer on and get a little bit closer to repainting. Something I should clarify is that I'm still using the 2-pack epoxy paints for the primer and the barrier coat. It's just the top coat that I've decided to use the single pack paint for. Okay, primer on. Right, while that paint dries, I have a little job to do. People often say, this steering's really dangerous, this cable steering, wire steering. And this one did actually come undone. It didn't break, but this turnbuckle unwound itself, and you can see it doesn't have any lock nuts on it. You can see the ones on Renko have lock nuts there. I think what happened was every time you tilt the motor up and down, there was a chance it just did a little turn. I can't think how else it would have wound. I don't think it would have been vibration. I think it was tilting the motor. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with this steering, but like all things, it just has to be done 100% right. No lock nuts either side. So, something I'm going to add. I've done a full video on winding this type of steering in the past, which I'll link to, but give you the short version. I'm just going to find the center. Here you see is this groove. So the very first step is to run the middle of the cable along that groove. So the very center of the cable goes in here, and then one of them's going to wind out to the starboard side, and the other one's going to wind out to the port side. This cable is actually a little bit short. You ideally would fill the drum. This only did a couple of turns. It actually worked really well, but that is something I noticed early on. Cable could do with being a foot or so longer. So 2 winds either direction. I would like 3 winds either direction so the drum's full, but as I said, had enough friction and it gave us enough turn lock to lock, so not a real issue, but it's not ideally how you do it. Alright, we're back in action. We can go to the mainland. That's always a win. I think I'm going to let that primer dry overnight, and then we'll do maybe a barrier coat tomorrow, and then a deck coat on the weekend. Nice sunset though. Because of the gravity situation we've got happening here in Australia, I'm going to paint the bulwarks before the deck so it doesn't drip onto it. This paint's quite old though. I've added some thinners, see if we can bring some life back to it. We'll see how we go. More thinners, I think. Too thick still. Okay, I've put this epoxy everywhere that I'd done work on the hull. I would love to have painted the whole thing, but this epoxy was just getting thicker and thicker. I put every drop of thinners I had on the boat in, and I'm glad I started by touching up everything that needed it, because by the time I finished it was right back to being too thick to paint. Just mixing up some of this Altex epoxy 2-part barrier undercoat. Then once that dries, we can just do the single pack non-slip deck paint. Okay, barrier coat done. Everywhere, wheelhouse, took quite a while. All right, we'll let that dry. It's supposed to rain tomorrow, but I think it's clear again sort of Monday, Tuesday. Then we'll sweep the deck up and do 2 coats of the top coat. Well, it's getting there. Still a way to go. More coats heading further up the boat this way, but you kind of get the idea. This video is already late enough, so I thought I'd show you what I'm up to, and I will push on. Still need to do the stern gland, haven't forgotten about that, but the grease fitting I've put in here has done such a good job of slowing it down that a bit of the stress is gone, but doesn't mean I shouldn't do it because I can't tighten it. Well, thanks for watching. As I said, a few more things to tidy up first, but then we'll be starting the new boat project, which is a smaller open boat. Maybe something that people feel is a little bit more achievable to do in the backyard. This boat actually currently lives in my neighbour's front garden, so we'll be starting it there before we flip it over and get it on the water. I haven't actually had a very close look at the boat myself yet, because my plan was to sort of film my own first look at it. It may turn out to be a disaster and I'm up against more than I thought, but I think it should be a relatively straightforward one. Although it's a traditional style boat, it is, I believe, glass on ply, so it should be pretty solid and certainly easy to repair if it does need any repairs. All right, well, take care and I'll catch you in the next video. See ya.